welcome to the Predictive Playbook for March the 30th, 2021. It's Tuesday, just a little bit after 1 o'clock today. I have Steve Merril on as our guest. He is having a great year, although he's had a bit of a pullback, but it's like a bullish stock like Apple. You surge and then you tread water for a little bit. So he's probably about ready to take another surge. But after having a 73% return on investment for this season, I mean, you really don't need to have another surge. But welcome to the show, Steve. How is the tournament treating you?
Yeah, tournament's been up and down. I mean, that's kind of what it's been like. Like you said, I'm probably about break even for the tournament overall, but it's been a monster season overall, right around that 70% return on investment in 4 months in college basketball. And I'll tell you, the really difference between a huge tournament and kind of a treading the water break even tournament is 3-point variance. We've talked about it before. And for me, that's really been the difference in this tournament. I've been on the wrong side of a lot of 3-point variance. Last night, once again, Arkansas +8. They lose by 9. I think it was an 8-3 deficit from 3-point shots. If just one extra 3-point shot goes in at any point in that game, they cover. But it's amazing, John, how tight the lines were last night.
Yeah,
The
they were.
sides and totals for the two games, all four sides and totals combined 10 points to the sides and totals. 10 points. That's an average of 2.5 points per over/under or point spread of the two games, the four possibilities. So that's in between a 2 and 3-point basket that the four were decided last night. That just kind of puts things in perspective. And you're a big numbers guy. It doesn't amaze me this time of year the numbers are sharper. It makes sense. They've got 30 plus games of data. But when you have like conferences that haven't even played each other much all year, non-conference, no common opponents, the fact that the lines are still that sharp just tells you how difficult it is to win long term nowadays against the point spread unless you have a strategy and a winning strategy.
Yeah, and that's been my discipline has been challenged in this tournament. As you know, I have had five consecutive profitable tournaments. Some of them very profitable, but this is not one of them. Last night I had Houston, and that is so indicative of my tournament. I can't begin to tell you. It's like if I said the wind was coming out of the east, it would suddenly come out of the west. Just unbelievable. You just have to kind of just shrug it off and move on. It's you can't win every year, but at the same time, we all try to. But it's still been a very enjoyable tournament for me. I've learned a ton from it. I found some tidbits today too. I tweeted them early this morning because like you said, I like numbers. This is the first time since 2012 and the second time in the last 30 tournaments that two teams from the same conference are meeting in the Final Four. The last time it happened was 2012 with Louisville and Kentucky, and now we have Houston and Baylor. And now here's one that I actually triple checked this because I could
No, no,
not.
John. No, you said conference. You mean state?
Oh, same state, right?
Yeah,
Sorry.
same state. Yeah, because I
Good
heard that. Yeah,
catch. Good
yeah. You're
catch.
not conference, state. Yeah,
Right.
got you.
Um, and this one I triple checked that no team from the state of Texas has won this. I mean, did you know that?
So I guess Houston never did win, right? Because they lost to NC
Right.
State on that buzzer beater.
Yep.
Yeah, you see, I would have said Houston has won it, but they didn't win it with Slam Jamma because I remember that was the Valvino miracle. And I guess Virginia beat them the other year. My Cavaliers, I was growing up in Virginia with Ralph Sampson being. So yeah, they lost back-to-back titles in the early 80s when I was a
Yeah.
youngin', just starting to follow sports. But yeah, that's amazing. You would have thought somebody from Texas, Baylor had, I was surprised John Baylor hasn't been there in like 67 years or whatever it is, or since 1950. Maybe it's more like 71 years or something. But I would have thought one of those teams
Yeah.
had won it back in the day.
The trivia question I'll ask later today at the 4:30 show with Rob Vino and Tony Finn. With all due respect, they're probably the oldest members of the Wager Talk crew. I say that as a compliment, I guess, because I'm not far behind them. I bet you one of them is going to be able to answer when was the last time a team from Texas won. And I obviously didn't know, but I went back and back and back. 1950. There were 8 teams invited to the tournament, and it was Western Texas,
Wow.
who now is Texas El Paso.
Oh, okay. I was going to say they don't even have a program anymore. Okay, they're UTEP now. Very interesting.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
actually found
I give
when I
Tony Finn. I'll make the odds. Normally, I'm on Rob Vino because he got one before the NBA show yesterday. I had one because I was watching NBA TV, and they had a Christmas Day replay on between the Buffalo Braves and the Cleveland Cavaliers from 1977. And I asked, and I had to Wikipedia this. I didn't know it. And Rob got it, though. I go, who did the Buffalo Braves become in the NBA? And Rob got that. So he's really good at that stuff. But Tony's a little more dated, so he might get a 1951. But so I got to ask you, who did the Buffalo Braves become, John Ryan? Do you know that one? I did not know, but Rob Bino did get it correct.
And we're talking NBA, right?
So I'll give you a clue. So the Buffalo Braves left in 1978 and became this current franchise.
The Seattle Supersonics.
No, that was Joe Ranieri's guess. But see, Seattle was in the title in 79, so I knew it wasn't them. I'll give you another clue. Their nickname is the city they went to in 1978. Then they moved to another city in 1984, but they had kept the same nickname that they currently still have.
Oh, I know this. You definitely gave it away, but I off the top of my tongue, I can't figure it out.
And I will give you the state now. California is the state that they switched cities in. Golden State was one of the guesses. It's not that one.
No, I was going to say actually the Clippers.
It is the Clippers. They went to San Diego in 78 and then LA in 84. But Rob Vino got that one. So Rob's sharp on these things. But a Western Texas is more of a Tony Finn type school. So I'm making Tony Finn a slight favorite, although I don't think either will get that because that's pretty damn insane. But
well, I'll make a little slide with Steve Merril's odds of these two gentlemen getting this question right.
I make Finn. Well, first, we're going to have heavy juice because that's how my sports book operates. So it's going to be Tony Finn minus 120, Rob Vino minus 110. Maybe we'll do a three-way line, actually. I'll do Finn plus 200, Vino plus 300, minus 200 that neither gets it. And then give them the school.
Okay.
Was it West or Western Texas? And then ask them if they know who that became, because that's even more impressive in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll make that even money across the board, all three-way lines.
Yeah, that's two bets, and you're gonna win.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean that's. But now UTEP though is the team. The reason they might get that is UTEP is the team that kind of broke the color barrier, right? And they played Kentucky and Roop. And weren't they still Western Texas in that movie? Because I remember watching that. I don't think they were UTEP yet. So these guys, they might get that actually.
Yeah, they might have used a different school name because it was the movie, but I'm not sure.
But I think when that played out in the real world, I think they were still Western Texas in the 60s or whatever. So those odds just moved. We just got heavy, sharp money on the yes that they'll know the school. But I don't think they'll necessarily know they won't know the school, but they might know the switch. So anyway. There's a rabbit hole for Tuesday.
The chat room here, John Harvey says they made a movie, Glory Road.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, it was about when Texas and they made Adolph Rupp look like a KKK leader because he didn't want to play the black players. And but that was Western Tech. In the movie, it was not UTEP. I think it was the real school name because they used Kentucky. So yeah, they might get that now. Glory Road. I couldn't remember the name of the movie. Hoosiers, Glory Road, two good March Madness movies though.
And with all due respect, James Patrick Linneman here in the chat room reminds us that Dave Koken is probably the oldest at 68. Maybe we could create a line for that too. Who is truly, if everybody tells their true age, what the ranking would be?
I think Rob Vino looks a lot younger than his age than anybody else on Wager Talk. Let's put it that way. And by the way, it's Johnny Detroit's birthday today. All seriousness, I saw it's his birthday. Yeah, I won't give away his age.
Well, I'm going to have to. I guess I'll Slack him. Is that what it's called? When you send a message to somebody in Slack, I don't get the jargon.
I like Slack. I never used Slack until we started using it a few months ago. It's actually not bad. I've gotten the hang of it. But I saw that, and we just hit 70,000 subscribers on Wager Talk TV yesterday, and then his birthday was today, so it was a good little early birthday gift for Johnny Detroit, who's, as you know, John has played a large, if not the largest role in that happening. So he's done a fantastic job.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. 70,000, and that's 70,000 pretty active.
Exactly. Yeah.
Those shows get several thousand every time one is aired. And the NBA one, I have to say, is my personal favorite. And I loved it yesterday. You might make a
cameo on that today, as you always do. I've got some inside info on that.
Yeah, see what's good about this show for the guys in the chat room is I don't appear on it, but my betting systems do. So I can get a jab into somebody without even saying anything. It's really funny show, but it's also a very informative show, and I listen to it. Also, Ski Profit has some great best bets. Steve Merril right here all of them, but at the same time, we all have fun with it too. It's not like, watching this is the world news tonight.
Right.
It's not like that, you know. And some people like those kind of shows, but, guys like us, we don't like that.
Well, it's funny too, John, because the college basketball show's on right before us, and it's probably the most serious show on Wager Talk TV with Ralph Michaels and Dave Koken, as you mentioned. Dave's got a subtle sense of humor. It comes out maybe one episode every week, but he's pretty serious otherwise. Ralph's actually a pretty funny guy too, but he's so spot on with all the trends and stats that it's hard for that show to be as light. So it's a great balance, as you and I agree,
Yeah.
balance in life and diversification. And let's be honest, I mean, the NBA regular season's a joke anyway, especially this year more than ever. So if there's ever a show to have fun with, it's the NBA regular season. When you have college-age kids getting paid $10 million a year, I think it's very appropriate.
Yeah, I agree 100%. With the teams that are remaining, I ran a little probability analysis, and Houston actually has the best probability. They obviously don't have the best odds, so I'm leading this into you to see if you agree that the value in the futures market, if there is any, would be on Houston. But I'll read them off here. It's 29% chance that Houston wins it, 25% that Gonzaga wins it, 21% that Baylor wins it, 15% that Michigan wins it, and then 8% that USC wins it, and less than 1% that UCLA cuts down the nets. So I should have put that into a chart. It's just not enough time in the day, but then you could see it. But do you think Houston, can pull this off? Because I had them last night, and they actually made me a bit angry. I'm feeling pretty good. Finally, I get a solid handicap, a solid win. I forget what the biggest lead was because it'll make me sick. But they forgot to play. That last 6 or 7 minutes, they totally just forgot to play.
Yeah,
It was
Houston
like they
is
were trying to. It was like playing not to lose, and I can't stand that. But anyway,
Yeah, no, we talked about it the last couple of weeks. I had Arkansas as my sleeper in the Final Four. It would have been nice had they gotten there last night, but Baylor looks really good. But in the other bracket, I really was looking for a reason to play against Illinois just from a game theory perspective, and it was Tennessee and Houston. And by the way, a lot of secondary brackets I did for fun. I've got Houston winning like half of them, so I might have a chance of doing really well in one of these 2, 3, 5, 10 million ESPN brackets, how many there are, because I've got Houston over Gonzaga, I think, in like half of them. But I went with Tennessee just as more of the
that's
long
great.
shot. But the one thing I saw a few days later after I released that, and we talked about it the other week, was ESPN did this, not this, well, I guess you call it sentiment. They took their 38 experts, all their TV hosts, analysts, and broadcasters that cover college basketball. They gave them each one bracket. And of the 38, none of them had Houston or Tennessee for that matter, or Arkansas. Maybe one had Arkansas, but none of them, I know none of them had Tennessee in the Final Four, let alone, Houston or Tennessee. But Houston winning the whole thing, they didn't even have any of them in the Final Four out of 38. And keep in mind, going in, Houston mathematically had the third best chance based on matchups of winning the whole thing. They had like a 9% chance a couple weeks ago, but nobody even had them in their Final Four. So huge negative sentiment there. You'd mentioned on your Twitter sentiment that Arkansas was second last out of all 68 teams going in. So, I like both of them for that reason. Had Arkansas pulled the upset last night, I'd really be sitting pretty because a lot of people have Baylor, obviously. Illinois going out early was a free ride. I just wish I'd had Houston instead of Tennessee. But Houston still remains very underrated. I mean, there's absolutely no love for them. So
Yeah.
you're going to definitely get value in the futures market. And then more so, Gonzaga has to play a competitive game tonight. They've won 26 straight by double digits, yet they're only a 9-point favorite tonight. So that tells you all you need to know about how dangerous USC can be. USC, the best 2-point defensive team in the country against the best 2-point offensive team in Gonzaga. Gonzaga should win tonight. But that's another reason why, if someone's listening, like, how can Houston have better odds to win? Well, it's because Gonzaga has to play an extra game still. So if Gonzaga gets through tonight, they will have a better chance than Houston. But the other thing I want to point out too there, John, is UCLA at less than 1%. They have now won an extra game because they had to play the play-in game. So they've already won, 4 games. You normally have to win 6 to win it all. They'll have to win 7. They've already won 4, and they're not even in the Final Four yet, like all the other teams would be. And they're still at basically 100-1 true odds. So it just shows why you never play those future odds. You would have played moneyline parlay with them from the start, and you could pull back now and make a nice profit already. It just shows why there's no reason to really ever play those big underdogs outright, because the money line parlays are always going to be a better investment strategy.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I had. I want to brag about my bracket. I had Illinois and Iowa in the final. I had Iowa against who was it? West Virginia, I think it. No, Arkansas. So at least the Arkansas wasn't bad, but yeah, I thought I was being pretty creative with Illinois, Iowa because that's the goal. The goal is to pick, against the public sentiment. And as we said, I think Arkansas was the second worst, and Iowa was the worst. So there's a case study right there where just because it's the worst doesn't mean the team's gonna go win the national championship. But especially when it's seeded that high, and then of course Oral Roberts was way below average. I would say about the 20th percentile. So that would have been a smart pick in hindsight based on the sentiment. So I run these things and then we learn, right? Learn how to use them better. I did run I actually tweeted this, and I unfortunately can't show it really effectively, but I ran the sentiment for the game of the first semifinal, Houston and Baylor, and it does reveal a pretty strong lean towards Houston, which I found pretty.
Surprised by that. Yeah.
I am too. So there's on that tweet you'll see it. It's got pie charts. Then I do a word cloud, which are in a word cloud, the biggest ones in the picture are the ones that are mentioned the most often. So it's 1,111 tweets, and I just kind of picked that name because 11 is a lucky number in ancient. I don't even know where it was. I guess it's China, but 11, 11. That's a very lucky number. It's a fortuitous number. So I just chose that arbitrarily. But anyway, let's talk about the games tonight because I'll start you off here with the USC, and you can talk me off the ledge here because I'm really starting to think that USC actually has a puncher's chance here to, no pun intended, knock Gonzaga out of the tournament. They rank one of the highest defensive opponent adjusted units in basketball, and they've been climbing. For not just this past week, but pretty much for the past, I would say, 6 weeks. And, right now they on opponent adjusted defense are 1, 2, 3, fifth behind. This is the order based on the team's last game: Memphis, Alabama, Tennessee, Houston, Southern Cal, followed by Illinois and Michigan. So Southern Cal is a surprise name, I think, to see it that high. Of course, they're going up against Gonzaga, who's number one in opponent-adjusted offensive rating. And Baylor's third, for what it's worth, for down the road there. And Houston is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, seventh. So Houston actually appears on both of the lists, and he's the only one that does.
Yeah,
I didn't notice that till just now.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've liked about Houston from the start is that not only are they one of the 2 or 3 teams all season that's been top 10 both, and by the way, Michigan's been there most of the season. Gonzaga is now as well, although at times Gonzaga was hovering around that 10th, 11th spot defensively, but they're so great offensively, more than makes up for it. But yeah, if you look at the 3 teams right now that are top 10 adjusted offense and defense, it's those 3 I mentioned in Illinois, who was a 1 seed. The other thing to keep in mind is Houston plays extremely slow, by far the slowest pace other than UCLA remaining in the tournament. Those type of teams are always dangerous. So here again, UCLA, the slowest paced team left, one of the slowest in the country. It's not a surprise they've made a run. Guess what? Oregon State played that way as well. They made an incredible run. USC fairly slow down half court. As I mentioned earlier, the best 2-point defensive team with that size down low. So, is it really the Pac-12 is that much of an underachiever and they're that much better than we thought? Or maybe they're just great tournament-type teams because, they're all slow-down half-court teams that do well. So maybe we're overreacting a little bit too much to the Pac-12 did. Maybe overreacting a little bit too much to the Big Ten. I did have that concern. We talked about it a few weeks ago, the Big Ten beating each other up during the regular season. And also, you got to look back. The Big Ten's only won once since 2000, Michigan State. And they didn't win before that till 1989. So it's been over 30 years that the second team has won from that conference. We see that a lot in football. And if you look at the NFL, the NBA, let's name some powerhouse NBA guys now from the Big Ten. I can't do it off the bat. I mean, Draymond Green's Michigan State. I wouldn't say he's a powerhouse player. He's a big, strong guy, but he's not a top 5, top 10. He's not a Stephon Curry. Went to Davidson.
Right.
There's
Yep.
some Pac-12 athletes in football and basketball that still come out ahead of the Big Ten. So I think that's an interesting matchup with the Michigan UCLA game we'll get to here. But USC, yeah, this is tough for Gonzaga. My other concern with Gonzaga isn't necessarily the defense; it's more the the schedule too. As I said earlier, they've won 26 straight games by double digits, yet they're only a 9-point favorite tonight. So that's telling you right now that this is a team they haven't played, a type of team. And I just think I think they're really good offensively, as good as we've seen in recent years, and I think that's legit even with the weak schedule. But defense wins championships, wins close games. If this is a slow down game, which Gonzaga doesn't like to play, and it's a tight game down the stretch, USC's been there, and Gonzaga has not. 26 straight wins by double digits might not be a good thing come Elite Eight, come Final Four.
Yeah, I mean,
BYU gave them a run, but we saw UCLA handle BYU already in the tournament. So, yeah, they have not played anybody for several months.
and UCLA has a lot of leadership on it. They only have 3 freshmen on the roster. They actually returned 86% of the minutes played and 89% of the scoring from last year. So, yeah, when I read that, and I was kind of like, well, I should have known this a long time ago than just now. But looking at their roster from their previous game, in other words, I was looking at who's on this team that is really good. I really wasn't expecting to find too much, but they have 7 players on this roster that ranked in the top 100 their senior year in high school, and 3 of those start, and that's sophomore guard. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. I'm terrible with names, but Johnny Juzang, and then there's Jamie Jaquez. Camarillo High School for him. He and the other guy, Juzang, came from Harvard Westlake School, both amazing programs. They were ranked 34th, 96th. Jules Bernard, 45th. Cody Riley, 44th. David Singleton, 83rd, 2018 class. And then bench players, a junior who is Jalen Hill, 64th in 2017. And then the last one is Jalen Clark, a freshman guard. But speaking of guards, and by the way, there's 6 players on this team averaging double figures, which no other team can say that, which is another big plus, I think, for them if they're going to take down a giant like Michigan. But it's not a team like Arkansas that had 3 freshmen in it. We may have seen the panic a little bit last night from that inexperience. I think, take Rob Vino's words from the show. He's been very consistent in saying Arkansas is 1 year away. Arkansas is 1 year away. And they certainly do have a lot coming back, a ton. It's basically everybody, and then the experience of having gone through this, you have to put them on your radar to win it next year as well. But their UCLA guards are both, they're all 6'6", 6'6", 6'6", anywhere between 210 and 225 pounds, and have tremendous length. And we always, at least for me, I always talk about length in the NBA because it's, for whatever reason, it's a more popular topic, I guess, in the NBA, or maybe the NBA season's longer. I'm not really sure, but this is the type of team with this length that can cause problems for the side-to-side ball movement that Gonzaga likes to do to free up that open shot. And as the day goes on, the more and more, I'm leaning towards UCLA. So I'm really interested to see what your breakdown is of this game, Steve. And if you do have an opinion on it or a strong lean, that would be great. But if you're neutral on it, that's good too.
Yeah, first, Jared's got the comment about the public dog tonight being USC. I mean, the line has dropped. But I'm not sure how public it is because I do the consensus report a lot for Wager Talk TV, and I'm seeing it pretty split at some spots, other spots leaning Gonzaga. In fact, Gonzaga's actually been kind of a public play the last few rounds, yet we just had Dave Sherapan on earlier, odds maker from Las Vegas on Wager Talk today, and he actually mentioned the books are going to need Gonzaga tonight. So I think it's more so some sharp action on USC. So Jared is right, the line has dropped. There is money on them, but I'm not sure it's necessarily public money. So we'll keep an eye on that. And that's weird because it's hard for me to imagine the public isn't on Gonzaga, at least recreational players, because they are such a powerhouse team. So I think that's a little bit of maybe of a sharp square divide there, Jarrett, more so in that game than we've seen in others, where I think probably the small tickets are Gonzaga, the bigger tickets from what I've seen are on USC. So some information there. As far as the Michigan UCLA game, that looks really split. Some spots I see leaning Michigan, some leaving UCLA. So I think they're going to have pretty balanced action there. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, you got that Pac-12 versus Big Ten. I think the general public has picked up on that now after a few rounds. Whether it's legit or not, I don't know. I mean, Livers being out for Michigan has not been a problem. I actually had a best bet on him against Florida State on Sunday for my clients at wagertalk.com. Florida State had turnover problems once again. You talk about a long team. The first thing I thought of was Florida State. They're about as long as anybody in the tournament.
Yep.
But they had turnover problems, and backcourt guard play is what wins this time of year. Florida State was really weak in that regard. So even without Livers, I'd like that setup. And I think Michigan's in a good spot here, too. Look, UCLA's had a nice run, but let's keep in mind they were in the play-in game for a reason, and they were trailing Michigan State, an inferior Big Ten team compared to this Michigan. And they were trailing them the majority of that game, needed overtime just to get the win. They play Alabama. Alabama's best player picks up 2 fouls a minute into the game on Sunday, and he's out basically for like 10 minutes after that. That game still goes to overtime. So it's a really bad setup here for UCLA, and line's only 6.5. I mean, it's not unreasonable. I mean, even without a player off for Michigan, if you really look at the overall seasonal body of work, that looks like a discount. But UCLA is playing a lot better now, and Michigan is a little shorthanded, so I understand it. But we have to see how this plays out because this is that last Big Ten team remaining, the only one that's really looked good so far in the tournament.
It's very true. Yeah, the USC Gonzaga matchup is showing about 50% of the tickets and 70% of the money. And this is on wagertalk.com/odds. Pretty good odds page for you guys to look at. And it's free. And it's live. It's not delayed. And you get all the Vegas houses like Westgate, Circa, South Point. They also have William Hill, DraftKings, Bookmaker, which is a pretty big one. Pinnacle has been around forever. And then Bet Online, and then there's a consensus. So not surprisingly, the totals have moved lower too, and that's another thing from the Rob Vino and Tony Finn show was that the backdrops in a stadium like Lucas Oil, since it's a NFL stadium, is going to be harder to shoot. And tell me if I'm wrong on this. I think UCLA has played there, or Gonzaga has played there already in the tournament. One of them. I thought it was UCLA actually, but now that I think about it, I think it's Gonzaga. But I think it's worthwhile, for the people in the chat room too, to verify that, because having played one game in that environment where it is difficult to pick up the depth is an advantage. I think, at least a modest advantage.
Well, I think the Gonzaga matchup becomes interesting again because they can score down low as well as anybody in the country. They rely less on that randomness from three. Baylor, meanwhile, best three-point shooting team in the country. Alabama made the most threes this year. They're gone. They didn't have a very good shooting night on Sunday. It's always dicey, and that's what you love about Gonzaga. They're so consistent, get so many easy points, and now they're taking on, as I mentioned, the best two-point interior defense in the country with a lot of size. So I think that's a really interesting game. And, we're talking about Gonzaga being, cheaply priced, and people say in the chat here saying they're baiting you into USC. Keep in mind that, I don't think they're baiting you into USC because Gonzaga's won 26 games by double digits, and now they're only an 8.5, 9-point favorite. So I'm not so sure the general public is jumping on USC because they think the line's too high. I mean, they're looking at a team that hasn't lost by double digits for 3 months or so. So I think this is a situation. You talked about wagertalk.com, the free odds there, as you mentioned. More money, less tickets, but more money on the underdog. So I think that's why the line is dropped. I think it's some sharps. Vegas also gets a lot of California action. We got 2 Los Angeles teams playing tonight. So the Vegas books are also going to probably have lower odds than we see maybe globally on the East Coast or offshore because the 2 California teams are going to get a lot of heavy action with UCLA and USC, especially since they just played 2 days ago. A lot of those fans probably stayed in town for an extended weekday vacation. So a lot of different aspects to look at when looking at that public money split.
That's a real good point. With Vegas, people forget. I forget myself too how close it really is
Right.
to LA. So that makes a lot of sense, and that would obviously people from LA are going to bet USC and UCLA till the cows come home. I just ran a little query. I'm waiting for the results. I took back-to-back double-digit wins from the Elite Eight on out, and it basically hasn't given me much of anything. The under is 66 and 53 for 44%. I'm sorry, for 56%. So that actually isn't bad, but you know, you and I are trend followers, right? So the under has gone under so much, and the market now is discounting games that don't even involve those teams that went under. And my thought is that these totals are probably, if there's any value, it's to the over. But the trend here, and with the stadium and the shooting backgrounds possibly making it difficult to make those threes, makes me really leery to take the over, because you just feel like an idiot by taking the over. I had the over in the Creighton Gonzaga game, another example of my wonderful tournament. And I watched the beginning. They're averaging 7.3 points a minute, which would have been a final score of over 200. Unsustainable, but when Gonzaga is involved and Creighton was making threes, you start thinking like, wow, this might beat the record, which is 193, by the way. And that was in a double overtime game with Purdue, and I forget who the opponent was. Doesn't matter. But then that game plays under by, I guess it was under by 12 points. So the in-game betting has really helped a lot. And I know one thing I'm going to do, Steve, and I say this with all good humor. You'll probably recall that I was boasting about the Oral Roberts money line bet that I made with 1 minute and 20 seconds while Rob Vino and I were waiting to go live.
Right.
And I posted it, and the betting gods, I'm convinced, got pissed, and I'm just not going to win any more games, or at least I'm not going to have a chance of getting above 50% in this tournament. Period. So I learned my lesson. I'm not going to even remotely come across as being boastful with a Twitter post on a money line bet like that. But I was pretty happy about it at the time, But
Well, I was going to say a couple of things on the Creighton game. Fast-paced Creighton, as you said, they like to play like Gonzaga. That in-game line early in the first half when it was scoring galore was in the 171, 174 range.
Yep.
And then it stays under by. But keep in mind, it was a blowout game, so we had no fouling. Gonzaga kind of slowed things down. It's not a coincidence, by the way, that both lines have dropped a point tonight and both totals have dropped a point. You've got two slow-down underdogs in UCLA and USC. Now, Michigan can play half-court slow as well. They hit some threes. That total's also 16 points less, 17 points less, so you got a lot of less wiggle room there. That's a 6.5. And by the way, 7 is kind of that cutoff line when teams foul and don't foul. So if Michigan is up by 6 or 7, get an extra 5 or 10 points with fouls there. So that makes that totals really tricky, in my opinion. The USC Gonzaga, though, of all the games we had in the tournament, I mean, it's hard to argue against the fact that USC to the under and Gonzaga to the over are correlated here, especially USC to the under. Because, as I've said, I mean, their matchup edge here is their size. Shooting lines are suspect. So if shooting outside is tough, that hurts the outside shot. And then Gonzaga is going to be challenged like they have not been challenged all year down low. And that total's still in the 150s range. So if you like USC, I mean, I don't normally recommend parlays unless they're somewhat correlated. I think this one's about as close to semi-correlation as we could have all year. Hard for me to imagine USC is going to win a shootout, John. I guess that's what I'm getting at. And obviously, for Gonzaga to win a 27th straight by double digits, they're going to need more points. They cannot get bogged down in a half-court game. So I think the side of the total in that Gonzaga-USC game is very interesting to look at. Either Gonzaga to the over, USC to the under, depending on what side or total you like. I want to sprinkle a little bit on a two-team parlay and, kind of get a nice little payoff if the correlation works.
Yeah, I like that too. And that game actually, hopefully it's going to build me a new app to use for in-game betting. And I started building one in the NBA where it's based on points per minute. And if you go, what I'm going to do is I have play-by-play data laying around somewhere for college basketball going back to '85, which is the beginning of the modern day tournament. And what my theory is that in-game, if you go 3 to 5 minutes at a pace of 7 points or more at the college level, you can probably get a really good under. Now, this all has to be done within the first 10 or 15 minutes. It's probably going to be the first 7 or 10 minutes. because then you lose the value after that. Your swings with the line are going to be much bigger in the beginning of a game if the pace is way different than what is expected. And that's what I saw in the Creighton game. Like you said, 174, 175 live. Um, that was clearly a chance. They were averaging 7.2 per minute for the first 5 minutes. They had 52 points in 10 minutes. Even that rate is high. And that's when you would bet the under, and then you wait for times like I think it was 3 minutes into the second half. They were 1.7 points per minute for 3 minutes, and that gave you that shot at I guess it was like 146, 147 area. Whether you could have gotten that, I don't know, but it really, interesting enough, it didn't bottom much below that, and the final score was 148 points. So at least the one side would have won, and possibly you would have middled it.
Yeah,
So
30 point middle opportunity there, which, I mean, obviously you'd have to have a little extra if you played a middle in it, because otherwise you're giving away your edge. But I mean, that's insane. I mean, you literally, that's but first my thought as well, John, was that you were getting like a 25 to 30 point middle opportunity halfway through a game. It's just insane. The end game stuff's fascinating because, I mean, just the pace of play, obviously 3-point shots make such a difference. And then, of course, you got to be careful looking at shots, because if you're missing more shots, you're going to get more shots. You don't want to penalize a team. It's like in the NFL, I like to look at drive charts, and I kind of discount these 2-play 70-yard touchdowns. But nowadays in the modern NFL, a team like Kansas City, for example, they shouldn't get penalized because they score on 2 plays, because they probably still would have scored on 10 plays, 70-yard drive. So that's where it gets tricky. Whereas if a really bad offensive team does it, it's a one-off. Where if it's a really efficient team, same thing in basketball, that the pace of play can speed up, but also you don't want to penalize the team because they're shooting off, because they get more rebounds, they're going to have more second chance shots. Gonzaga makes so many of their baskets, they probably, their shots per game probably doesn't correlate anywhere towards what their pace is, because they really are a 55-60% offensive team many nights. In fact, I think I saw that stat the other day. Once again, they broke some record as far as consecutive games or amount of games this season. I think maybe it was amount of games this season, like 9 times now they've shot over 59 or 60% or 55. It was something insane. But they're playing a weaker schedule, but still incredible how good they are offensively.
Yeah, nevertheless, though, I mean, the lowest they shot was 49.3 off the top of my head. They did it twice.
Crazy.
Everything else is above that.
For the entire season, they're making every other shot they take. It's just insane. You're talking about 30 games or so now. And keep in mind, people, I mean, I wish they'd played these teams later in the year, but they played Kansas. They played West Virginia. They played some big boys. They put up 100 points, 90 points in those games.
Yep, 102.
Now, they were obviously, ready to play from the start. Those other teams are better now, I think, than they were. But, yeah, it's just, but there again, they've been off for so many months. And BYU was the only team that tested them, and they were down by 10 in the first half of that conference tournament game. Still came back to win, I think, by 12, right? They outscored them by 22 after the half.
Yeah.
That was maybe the wake-up call. That might be the best thing, by the way, that could have possibly have happened to Gonzaga the last 3 months, was BYU leading by 10. Otherwise, I'd be very concerned about it.
To your point, too, you can't say that Gonzaga is a poor offensive rebounding team simply because they rank 178th, averaging 8.2, because they don't need the offensive rebound.
Yeah,
that's one of the traps you don't want to fall into. But USC does average 10.2, and that's somewhat meaningful because they play at a slower pace. Yeah. So do you have any leans on these 2 games here, or the tournament coming up? Like, who do you think is going to be the Final Four? And
well, I think as far as the futures play, I still like Houston, like you said. And it's something. Look, these single elimination, they're not round robins, they're single eliminations. No matter what sport it is, whether it's boy or girl soccer as a kid, whether it's a poker tournament, you want to avoid playing the best team. So that's why I took some shots on that other side of the bracket by not having Baylor and Illinois in the Final Four, because I wanted to play against Gonzaga as a game theorist, but they really had a pretty easy setup. And I think this is their only test so far. If Michigan is really good without Livers like they've looked so far, maybe Michigan can be their test as well. But this is Gonzaga's big test. So, Houston and Baylor both could get really lucky tonight. They're huge USC fans, to say the least. So I think there's still some value with Houston. And I think also that parlay I mentioned, whether you like Gonzaga in the over or USC in the under, I think USC in the under is more correlated because you could, a lower scoring game. That's not how Gonzaga wants to play. So if USC is going to win, it's going to have to be low scoring. So I think that's one of the most correlated parlays I've seen all season. So I'll give that as some free advice here because I know a lot of our listeners and viewers are sharper than the average bettors out there that watch these shows, and they understand when we're talking about parlays, we normally don't recommend them, but this one has a mathematical correlation. I think that is quite interesting.
Hey, I thought this was an interesting comment here. Pressure on the Zags' perfect season because it's been 1976 since a team won the championship undefeated, and initially my reaction would be, well, no, they just seem to be on a mission. They're not lacking confidence. They're beating everybody by double digits the last 26 times. But it's a good point though, because now the screws could get a little bit tighter, especially if USC is able to match them early in the game. That the longer that USC stays in the game, I can see Gonzaga actually starting to feel it a little bit, but we haven't seen it to date. BYU, like you said, that was just like a locker room chat. They made the adjustment. They came out and smoked them.
Yeah, well, I'll leave this as my final comment thoughts here for the show. Is that I think that it's not as relevant now because you lose, you're done. They want to be undefeated, but they want to win the championship, and they're 100% correlated. You can't do one without the other at this point. I think the biggest thing is what you mentioned, John, is if it's a tight game late. They haven't been in that situation. The BYU game was not a tight game late. They're down by 10 at the half. They outscored them by 22 and won by 12. That wasn't a 2-point game with 2 minutes to go. If we see that tonight, that's going to be what's interesting. But we won't know until they play the game. But I think, USC needs to slow the game down. That's why USC to the under is definitely correlated, in my opinion.
And for my final comment, I'm going to the window with Houston. They're plus 500 at MGM where I'm looking right now. Baylor is plus 300. Gonzaga plus 125. And I'm also going to, and this is pizza money, by the way. I'm going to take some more pizza money and put it on USC. They're plus 1,400. So imagine what these futures values will do if USC pulls off the upset. Baylor's going to go to the 125. Houston's probably going to be, it's going to be lower. And then if that happens, then you can talk about, different strategies to hedge it, or if you're just going to ride it right into the sunset, which I think I would with Houston. But who knows? If USC at plus 1,400 wins, I actually like that bet better than the game bet. And do you agree with that quickly, Steve? Or I know you have to
Yeah,
get
and I
going.
think you can also money line parlay both Houston. Houston's going to be an underdog to Baylor. USC will be an underdog to
Yep.
basically everyone they play, unless UCLA pulls the upset as well, which is that both of them winning is very unlikely. So I think a money line parlay, you could just play the money line on the Baylor Houston game, play the money line. Now the difference is, of course, with Houston is that you're getting a better price now because Gonzaga could lose. We'll know the result of that by the time they play Baylor, but that's always an option as well.
I like that bet too. Yep. Well, I guess that'll put the big bow on the show, as they say. And Steve, I really appreciate you coming on board today. It's always awesome. Always learn a lot. And I'm looking forward to the NBA show. And guys, you got to watch this NBA show. It is Comedy Central on steroids. I swear to you. At least I think it's hysterical. And the banter back and forth is all friendly. It's just very, very cool show. And you get best bets from 3 or 4 of the guys that really, really have been doing it a long time and know what they're doing. Like Steve Merril, for example, will be on the show in just a little bit of time. And of course, I like getting badgered too, where I don't have a mic to defend myself, but that's all right. It's okay. I think those systems actually have done pretty well. I think they're like, I never really figured it
Yeah, they've
out
done well. Yeah, we
officially.
have a good one today. I'm excited to break down. You sent it to me in advance, which I appreciate. And about 3 o'clock Eastern, Wager Talk TV, wagertalk.com, then on YouTube, Wager Talk TV, 3 Eastern, and then archived all the time on Wager Talk TV. So thanks
Yeah,
for
you,
having me
you can
on,
say
John.
to
We'll chat soon. I'll see you virtually on the NBA show here in a little bit.
you can say to Ranieri too that if he keeps saying he doesn't understand what the hell I'm saying, you can tell him that I actually said that he wouldn't understand this one by any stretch
Oh,
of the
no,
imagination.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Steve, and we'll chat soon again. And for the Predictive Playbook, I am John Ryan, and may all the wins be yours.